The agenda this week weighed the potential for intergenerational healing in the wake of historical traumas and stepped aboard the remarkable C3 expedition that sailed around Canada during this country's sesquicentennial. The agenda's week in review begins considering the province's overhaul of policing in Ontario. This bill definitely moves to more, what's the word I want to look at? More oversight, tougher oversight of police activities. In your judgment, are the average male and female cop on the beat in this province concerned that this goes too far?
Absolutely.
They are.
More oversight should not come at the expense of due process. And what's happening with this, and first and foremost, I just want to state that we're not against oversight, we're not against being accountable. That's not it at all. And actually, I would say Mr. Justice Tulloch was one of the areas where actually we did have true consultation. Actually, I think Mr. Justice Tulloch is a good man. He had a tough job, and actually, we supported the majority of the recommendations that he put forward. Where we take issue is when we get this document and we see rights being stripped away from police officers. In fact, being able to give the chiefs of police the ability to fire an officer who acquires a disability, post-traumatic stress disorder. You know, me as a person who has an invisible disability, I have epilepsy. This is extremely concerning on a personal level, and many of our people who have accommodations. So to send this signal is incredibly concerning for the people that I represent.
So the average cop on the beat who looks at this says, oh my goodness, you've just made it far more difficult for me to do my job.
To the point of, why would you want to go into law enforcement? We have no issues with oversight, accountability, and then to look at this and to see the privatization aspect of things, and to talk about how does privatization for for-profit companies coming in make it better and safer for the citizens of Ontario. When you're talking about disturbance response, ticketing, taking away K9, and all these other specialized units and trying to implement these things, break and enters after the fact, where you send these security guards out to your home, where you've totally had an invasion of your privacy. Also, we believe this will not bring diverse communities together with the police in any way, shape, or form.
Well, that's okay. Let me just push back a little bit on that, because I'm not. Yeah. What you didn't add on that list is the cop on a Sunday afternoon making double time watching a construction crew, you know, do its thing, and there's no need to pay a cop double time to do that when you can pay an average citizen way less.
Well, that's certainly, we certainly can have that conversation, but at the end of the day, that officer is on their own time, generally working for private companies who are paying them separate and apart from the municipalities themselves.
Okay, Kingsley, let me get you to come back. You now hear that, in the view of Rob, many police officers in this province are going to feel unusually in the crosshairs on this one, more so than they think is comfortable for them to do their job. What's your response to that?
Well, what we are seeing, we have millions of dollars paid out annually for civil suits involving police abuse. We have a number of police officers that are suspended with pay, some of them collecting more than $100,000 per year. The Sunshine List, just last summer, brought that to highlight. Constable Forcillo, the one who shot Sammy Yatin on the empty street car.
He's alleged to have violated his bail conditions.
Bail conditions. Well, he has been on suspension for 3 years and collecting his full salary. And they are talking about shortage of money. He's convicted. He was found guilty. He's just appealing the sentence.
So is it your view the police have nothing to complain about when it comes to these changes?
I'm not saying that they have nothing to complain about. I am not, nor is Batsy, anti-police. We are anti-bad policing. But policing has become a burden on society as opposed to be there to serve and protect. It has departed from the key principles enunciated by Sir Robert Peel, the 9 principles enunciated by Sir Robert Peel in 1929 when he founded modern policing.
Let me get Kate to weigh in on this. You've heard, obviously, the police saying this is going to make our job way too tough. Obviously, you've heard Kingsley articulate the other side. Where's the sweet spot in all of this?
Well, I mean, policing in Ontario does cost more per capita than any other province. We're about $50 more per capita than BC, and our crime rate is comparably a lot better. So that's one figure to keep in mind, is the cost. And so I know that municipalities are looking for ways to cut costs, and hiring private security guards to do some of the work that's not core police functions is something that they've looked to do. I think it's important that the Act for the first time defines what core police functions are, and that's important for a lot of other things. Do
you have a view as to who's more right on this argument?
Oh, that's not fair.
It's totally not fair, which is why I asked. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think Kingsley has a good point. We live in a society in which we give up certain rights to be policed, and it's citizen policing, as Robert Peel said. The police are the people are the police.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that comes some restrictions on what we can do as individual citizens. It also adds added responsibility for police officers. And of course, that comes in the form of oversight. And so do I think that the changes in oversight are going to hamper what police do? I don't think so.
Quam, I want you to, we need a good psychiatrist here, to help us understand the difference between personal trauma and historical trauma. Help us out.
Well, when I think of personal trauma, I think of things that have happened to you. So traumas, you have been a witness or you have been a part of a traumatic experience. And when I think of historical trauma, I think of traumas that you haven't necessarily been a witness to, you haven't necessarily experienced, but have been passed down to you. They're things that have happened to your culture or your group. They're things that may have happened to your father or your father's fathers or your mother's mother, but they've been passed down to you either through culture, and sometimes people think even through your genes.
I think somebody sitting beside you may have some personal experience at this. Okay, Marta, you're from, now do I say you're from Spain or do I say you're from Catalonia?
This is a good question. Don't get me going into that.
Particularly at this time. Well, I think that answer suggests that a lot of the history of that part of the world has been visited on you. How so?
Yes, actually, I'm the daughter of a father who went to exile after the Spanish Civil War. So I know a bit about that, how trauma passes from one generation to the other. And actually, I'm about to publish a book about that.
Why did he go into exile?
He was part of the defeated side.
The Republicans?
The Republicans. My family were anarchists. And so they had to go to exile.
Picking up on Quam Mackenzie's comments, that all happened to him.
Yes.
The historical trauma is what has befallen you. How has all of that affected you?
Well, I'm here. I'm in Canada. I don't think this is a frivolous answer. I think exile expresses in many ways, depending on each subject. And I think for me, it has been always kind of disquieting feeling in Spain. So this is why I decided to leave. But this is too personal, right? I don't know if that makes for a paradigm or a model to explain how trauma passes from one generation to another. But to some extent, yes, I believe.
Can I jump into that? Because my mother's a Holocaust survivor. And so I grew up in the Netherlands, which had a very savage German occupation in which family members of mine ended up in Auschwitz, which is one of the reasons I studied the site. And I remember very well that every time that I came to England, because we had family in England as a boy, the moment we arrived in Harwich, that I had this sense of liberation because I literally entered on soil that had not been occupied and that had not been submitted to the test that my countrymen, the Dutch, had so clearly failed between 1940 and 45. So I must say that when Marta says that, the answer is I'm here in Canada, I decided after I had moved to England as a student to be at the University of London, that I could never go back to the European continent for the very reason that I couldn't breathe there.
Well, let's go to get a story from the European continent. Miroslav, you were born in what I guess today we call the former Yugoslavia. How have the events there of the last couple of decades had an impact on whatever historical trauma may be engaged in your life?
Well, the events of the last 2 decades go obviously back long in history, but way in which my life is particularly connected with those events is that I too am a survivor. My father was one of the many after World War II who who was pulled into death marches and labor camps and survived in a miraculous kind of a way. You know, the strange story is that he had discovered love. In fact, he has discovered, he said, the God of love in the midst of what was unspeakable hell. And that story, his story, has shaped, of course, my life. And in some ways, I myself have been then interrogated when I grew up by the regime that oppressed him, and in the same city in which he partly experienced that traumatization. So the kind of remembering, how does one remember what has transpired, is very much part and parcel of who I am. But also, this is more directly and indirectly. Obviously, I'm a Croatian of a kind of German extraction, and the events of the past decades have had profound impact on how we relate to one another. And even when I have not suffered trauma, my people have, and I have to figure out where I fit in the story of my people and story of my people with other peoples, which was the cause of the conflict.
We should just remind everybody, it's C3, Expedition C3, coast to coast to coast, C3. That's what the C3 stands for. And let's just, Sheldon, you want to bring this graphic up here as we start and just remind everybody what this is about? 3 coasts, 25,000 kilometers, 150 days. And let's just bring the map up and show you what 75 communities around the world's second biggest country looks like. That is one heck of an expedition. Okay, Serene, you get comfortable for a second because I need to talk to Jeff off the top just to get some background in place. Where'd you get the idea for this in the first place?
Just looking at the map of Canada.
Come on.
Yeah, really. It was, I mean, it's, in a way we poured 20 years of experience from students on ice into the project, but most of that time's been spent on the Arctic coast, the longest part of our coastline. And staring at that amazing map of our country, it just seemed like a no-brainer to do a journey that would connect all 3 of our coastlines. In fact, all 4 of our coastlines, if you include the Great Lakes. Right. So on the back of a napkin one afternoon, about 2.5 years ago, the whole plan got sketched out, and it came to 148 days.
And that's, I mean, okay, here's what we got to get into. How did you have any clue how long it would take?
Well, just lots of experience over the last 25 years leading ship-based expeditions all over the world.
I had such an incredible time, and to be quite frank and honest with you, I was so conflicted about whether I should go and whether I belonged on that ship.
Now, I knew that. What would the issue have been?
A number of things. So Canada 150. I'm an activist. I also work in the media, so this year has been a challenging year to navigate.
Because, well, as an Indigenous person, you don't think there's a hell of a lot to celebrate.
No, and also the amount of money spent on various things and the amount of money needed in our communities so desperately for things like mental health and clean water. And so I'm always trying to be authentic to who I am as an Indigenous person, but also very aware that being a part of a journey and knowing when you can be a part of a platform that allows you to raise your voice and to be a part of the conversation is really important. So I actually, right up until the day before, was conflicted. And then I was like, I'm doing this.
Now, what sealed the deal for you?
I have a friend, Dio, who has on the very first leg, or one of the first. First, yeah. And I had lots of conversations with her about her experience. And then also, I wanted to go to the north. I think, you have to be able to connect with all of your people to truly understand what's going on. I'm from Batchewana Bay, so on Lake Superior.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is up there if you live in Toronto, but it's not the north.
Yeah, it's the gateway. We call it the gateway to the north. Yeah, and it's really not the north. To me, it's still sort of central Ontario if you really look at Ontario.
I guess on a map it is, but it feels like Northern Ontario from downtown capital city.
Exactly.
Okay, so you decided to go for it. You got on the ship, sorry. Can't make that mistake again, my goodness. At what point did you know you'd made the right decision?
Day one.
How come?
It was the leg with the most Indigenous participants so far. And I knew I had made the right choice because I landed at the airport and immediately connected with people I knew from my media world and also a young girl who I met earlier in the year from Nunavut, which is an incredible program in Ottawa. And the first thing she said to me was, "That was the most intense thing I've ever done. It's going to be really, really hard for you." She's like, "But this is the one place where people can't jump ship on conversations that you want to have."
Now, it's been a while since you were on the ship, and yet I can, I don't know you at all. We just met. You seem very emotional talking about this.
Yeah, I'm like really trying to fight tears right now.
I know. How come?
So many things. Pamela Gross, who is now running for office in the North since the time we were on the ship, or Jimmy, who we just saw, who was our bear guard. And, it's really easy to decide that you know exactly what's going to happen in any conversation. But what happened for me on that ship was that I had to trust a lot of things that were happening and trust in a lot of conversations. And since we got off the ship, I've also connected with some of the people who we were a part of this journey together, and people are changed. I'm changed. And as an Indigenous person, being around that many settlers and feeling terrified and angry, but also an incredible amount of compassion, I believe in the work that's being done, and I think that there is a future for us together, and it's really easy to just shut that out and to engage in the conversation only with my own people.
So you may not have been sold on the notion of reconciliation before the trip began, but you are now?
I'm not sold on the idea of reconciliation before truth. I think part of the TRC's entire mandate was that you must have truth before reconciliation can happen.
And we're not there yet.
We're not there yet. Reconciliation is the pretty part of the package, and that's where we all want to jump to. And that's a great way to frame the conversation. But what happened for us on this journey was a lot of truth speaking and a lot of people finding their own truth in the conversation.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review for this Friday, November 24th, 2017. You can see all of those conversations in their entirety at tvo.org, on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, and thanks to our nightly Twitter live stream on our Periscope page. That's periscope.tv/theagenda.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit tvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.